One in Three is intended for mature audiences. Episodes contain explicit content and may be triggering as they often include violence and other varying forms of abuse, such as emotional, psychological, sexual, and physical. In most cases, names have been changed to protect all involved. Please note, statements and opinions of guests do not necessarily reflect those of my own. Hi, warriors. Welcome to One in Three. I'm your host, Ingrid. One theme I kept repeating over in my social media posts for Domestic Violence Awareness Month here in the United States was that awareness is just the beginning and that real action takes all of us. My guest today, Mary Lobson with REES, is living proof of that. She and her organization are out there turning awareness into action. Here's Mary. Hi, Mary. How are you?
I'm good, Ingrid. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so before we get started into our conversation, could you give just a little background so people can get to know you some?
Sure. So my name is Mary Lobson. I have currently I'm the founder of REES, which we will talk about later. But I'm someone who's worked in the gender-based violence field for like 35 years. It's been a long time that I've been working in this field. And I've had opportunity really to be involved in a lot of different initiatives. When I started this work, and I'll tell you how I kind of fell into it. My husband at the time knew a man who needed to be supervised in order to spend time with his son. And there was issues of domestic violence, and so they needed a safe place or a safe person around for his son. And I said, "Oh, I could do that. How hard can that be?" You know, I had worked in social services and in this space, and uh, sent my resume to his lawyer, which went to the other lawyer, and then found that there was a real need for that type of service for families experiencing domestic violence. And that really led to what eventually was the first supervised access center in Canada, specifically for families experiencing domestic violence. So I am Canadian. I'm from Winnipeg, but I also I say that I uh, commute to Buffalo. I am back and forth between Winnipeg and Buffalo frequently, and that was really my start into the gender-based violence field. Um, I did that work for a long time, working with families, supporting families who were experiencing domestic violence. They were in conflict, they were in crisis, and really ensuring that children had safe opportunities to maintain relationships with both of their parents. So this issue, has been one that I've worked in really my whole adult life. In 2009, I was part of a consortium of domestic violence organizations, and we brought in a woman named Cynthia Fraser from the National Network to End Domestic Violence in Washington. Um, NNEDV, as it's kind of commonly known, has a program called the Safety Net Project. And back then, technology and gender-based violence, technology and domestic violence was a really new thing that people were talking about. And so the Safety Net Project was really the leader in looking at technology from a trauma-informed lens to think about how technology could be used for good to support survivors, but then also um, the harm that the harm and the ways technology can be misused to perpetuate harm. And so I was super fortunate to be one of two Canadians who got invited down to what at that time was called the Training of Trainers. And Safety Net ran a program for all the state coalitions. Um, so tech advocates, leaders at the state level across the US would come together every year and do training and then take that back to their organizations. So me and a woman named Rhiannon in BC, we would come back to Canada and we would get to do that training here. So we would work with law enforcement, anti-violence organizations, school divisions, like judges, crowns, really the folks who work to support victims and survivors uh, in the area of, it was predominantly domestic violence. I think that that language has changed a bit now, and it's certainly more inclusive of harm. But I got to do that for a number of years. And then um, around 2018, no, 2016, I saw the film The Hunting Ground, which is a film about uh, sexual violence on campus. So colleges and universities. It had been acclaimed at film festivals, was very much in the media, and I reached out to two of the women that were in the film, saying, "Would you come to the city that we live in and do a screening of the film to launch Sexual Assault Awareness Month?" So that was 2016 actually that we did that launch, and meeting Annie and Andrea it was just a really, you kind of look back and you think of things in your life that occurred that were, kind of levers or things that maybe took you in a direction. And I I got exposed to the issue of campus sexual violence, both from the film, and certainly I knew about it. It's not a new phenomenon, right? No differently than when we were in school. This issue, sadly, is one of the only violent crimes really not to have decreased in the last 30 years. And so my time with Annie and Andrea and thinking more about the issue of addressing sexual violence on campus led eventually to the development of REES, which stands for Respect, Educate, Empower Survivors. And it's an online platform for reporting sexual violence on campuses, or that's where we started. We wanted to create a trauma-informed platform, and I can talk a bit more about it later, but a trauma-informed space for survivors to be able to tell their story, to document that story, and then have agency and options around how they choose to share it. So that launched in 2020, and now we are at colleges and universities, but we're also in other spaces. So we're working in music festivals, we work in sports, we work in workplaces, we work in the tech sector. So really thinking about where are the spaces that harm is occurring, where survivors maybe don't have access to resources, don't have access to clear reporting mechanisms. How do we use technology to um, enhance supports for them? And then also, how do we use technology to gather data that can then be used to inform prevention? So that's kind of that, where I started and where we are today. Mm-hmm.
And that's an incredible it's an incredible resume. And even though it wasn't exactly the same path, that they're all
Mm.
so intertwined
Yeah.
that I'm sure it was easier to pivot into those different roles. Do you have a background in IT as well, or is that something that you've learned as you've gone along?
Yeah, I am what they would call a non-technical founder.
Okay.
I don't have an IT background. My work has always been, frontline, supporting people, working directly with victims, survivors, families. Um, but I had a very clear vision of what the platform should look like. We did a lot of, so working in the field for so long, you have some understanding of what people's needs are because you hear that from them. And then um, the principles of being trauma informed, and I can talk about those as well, but they really guided what we wanted the platform to look like and to think about that. And then I was so fortunate to meet a man that I will shout out on this call, named Chris DeRossi, who was the chief architect for the Mac operating system for Apple. He was head of like this secret mission that if you Google it, if you Google Star Trek, Apple, you'll find that there was this, kind of secret mission back in the day um, related to technology, and so he and I met. He liked what we were doing, and became an advisor to us. So he's been a technical advisor to our team for a number of years, and really has been able to help kind of take the trauma-informed lens that we have at the work, and then build technology that really honors that. That really, when we make design decisions, we think about how could this be misused? How does this ensure survivor safety? Does it? Are we compromising it anyway? And so we've been really thoughtful. We have an amazing engineering team. Maria is our CTO. Just a great team that has really leaned into trauma informed design. And I've come to know now, like many of the things that we think of as trauma informed aren't necessarily aligned with how technology typically would be made. Like thinking of creating technology from a place of consent and opting in or opting out and being really transparent about the way technology, the way information is gathered and how that could be used or not used. So it's been really interesting to learn. I know way more today than I did 5 years ago. That's for sure.
It sounds so overwhelming to me because I
Yeah.
am so not
Oh.
a tech savvy person.
Uh,
So I'm really, really excited to get into Reese and all those details. And I love that you have thought about the integrity of the victims and the
yeah.
survivors. It's scary to put your information out there, not
Absolutely.
especially if you're fearful of perpetrators coming to retaliate
Absolutely.
or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm super excited also that you've brought up trauma informed because that
Mm,
is a topic that's come up quite a bit
mhm,
in some of my episodes. And
mm,
I don't know that I've really gotten into it as far
mm.
as what does trauma informed mean. So do you mind just detailing that a little bit?
Trauma, you know, it's kind of a bit of a buzzword these days or more in recent years. And, you hear about trauma informed workplaces, or we talk about trauma informed technology. We throw that language around. And I think it's a great point because I think unless you're in this space or you work in this space, you maybe can have some idea kind of what that means, but not necessarily. And I even think within the space, there's not these are what it actually is. It's principles that inform the way people do their work. So for us, the way we build technology and the culture we want to create, as I say, workplaces, other environments. So thinking about safety kind of as foundational to that, um, being trustworthy and being transparent. Um, the, um, in tech, I'll say it, but I'll also give some examples of what these things are as well. Like, so for us, transparency um, means that people understand what happens with their information, where it can go, where it can't go, those kinds of things. Agency, giving choice to people so that they have options, so that survivors have options about, in our case, how they want to document their story, how they want to share that story. Collaboration is a really important principle of being trauma informed. We don't have all the answers in this work. We don't, we can think about it and we can, use that experience to help guide us, but we also really value the collaboration and contributions of the folks in the different spaces that we work. That's really an important being a part of being trauma informed. There's that saying sometimes that we hear, kind of nothing about us without us. And I think this is a good example of that, where it's important that the experiences of survivors are heard, are um, considered, are, I don't want to say embedded, but certainly they again they're foundational to what we're doing and how we're making it and how we're thinking about it. As you said earlier, trust is important. And if we're putting a platform out in the world that we want people to use, we have an obligation to safeguard their PII, their personal identifying information. Um, in our platform, that's encrypted, and we actually can't access it. So if you were to come to the platform and create a record, let's say you're a student or you're involved in one of the spaces where we work, we can't access your record. I wouldn't be able to verify that Ingrid has a record in the system. And that's really deliberate because we wanted to create that safe space for people. So, choice, voice, empowerment, those are kind of principles of being trauma informed. So it's really thinking about what what does the person who's experienced harm, what do they need? Where are they at? Starting where they're at, not bringing, kind of our belief system or our assumptions or presumptions about what that might be, but meeting folks where they're at. And again, I think for us, the ability to provide options around how a survivor can use our platform, the different spaces they can be in, the different functionalities that it has, hopefully for them, provides that trauma informed space that they feel okay coming to and that they feel okay using. We've had a lot of feedback, from survivors, people who've experienced harm that said, "Oh, I wish I had this when I, was going through my incident," or "I wish I had this just to document my story when it was going on." And that for me has been super meaningful because that's why we made it. Um, yeah. So that was maybe a long answer to that question.
No, but I think you included all the important pieces. It's you're anticipating what the needs are, but getting feedback to adjust
Absolutely.
as
Yeah,
necessary.
for sure.
And then collaboration, I
Hmm.
think, is huge,
Yeah,
huge, because
absolutely. Yeah.
recognizing where your limits are and being able to get the organizations or the individuals who
Yeah.
are needed to step in, and options
Hmm.
is, when you are coming from either sexual trauma, domestic violence trauma, combination of the two, or other
Hmm.
forms of trauma, you are coming from a place where you've lost control. And then to
Yes.
have options, to not just
Hmm.
be narrowed down into you
Yeah.
can either do this or do that.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
that's really great.
Yeah, for sure. We talk about it, providing agency and options for people, empowering them with choice. That would be some of the language that we use when we, because we work very specifically in the area of reporting. Often reporting looks like a single use reporting form where you fill it out and click send. And we know that, again, there's kind of buzzwords, but one of the phrases is healing is not linear. It's not something happened to me. Now I'm going to tell someone, then I'm going to seek support. And then, then I'm going to do this. Everybody's different and those experiences are different. And we need to recognize that what you need and what I need, they may be similar. There may be overlap in that, but we need very different things. We might have very different processes of coming to terms with what happened in our experience. So, um, as I say, for us, those are really um, foundational to the work we do and really critical to it.
Definitely. And healing not being linear, that's huge, because
Hmm.
you don't want to discourage somebody from continuing their healing journey by
Yeah,
thinking, "Oh, I'm not doing this the way I was supposed to do it." And you
yeah,
can be making progress and fall back, or, something else
yeah,
surfaces.
yeah, for sure. And we hear so much, or i- in our culture about, um, well, a victim wouldn't have done that, or that doesn't seem like what a victim would do, or that kind of language that we sometimes hear, and it's like, there isn't a perfect way to be someone who's experienced harm. I appreciate some people really resonate with the language of victim and survivor. Others really don't. And so even language around how people come to the platform um, can be alienating. If we talk about, well, we're only for survivors. Well, if I don't identify as survivor, that's maybe not a place for me. Um, if I identify as a victim, I'm going to maybe feel different. Because we work in higher ed, we work a lot with international students. And so their concept, construct, thinking about harm and, interpersonal violence may be very different from where they're coming from. So there's a real complexity in reporting that I think is maybe undervalued and probably misunderstood in a lot of cases, or not even thought about. It's just kind of, oh, I've got a Google form. We've made a Google form. Google's great, but that's not the place for reporting sexual violence, or some other products out there that, they weren't created for those spaces. And really recognizing the critical opportunity that's provided to someone who's experienced harm when they decide to report. Um, yeah, we hold that. We hold that tightly. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it sounds like a very personalized system that you have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about it. Let's find out.
Sure.
Like, I'd love to find out exactly what REES is and what you guys
Okay.
do.
Okay. And I'll say, I'm a non-technical founder. My kids would laugh and be like, "Oh, mom, like, can't even put Netflix on, or, you can't even do things on your phone." And I think, as I said, it's the way we have thought about technology. And so for us, that's about agency, options, choice. So when we started in higher ed, we looked around to say, okay, what's out there already? What are the ways that, you know, what are the good things that we like that exist in the world? And then what are the ways that we feel they should be different? Um, First and foremost, for us, really relates to privacy and data security, because that is, the essence of whatever technology is created. It's how does it store people's information? How does it safeguard people's information? Um, who has access to information? All of those principles we took time to really think about. And there's something called privacy by design. And privacy by design thinks about privacy from the onset, not kind of let's make something and then think about how do we make it secure, but rather how do we think about, if I'm a survivor, if I'm someone who's experienced harm coming to this platform, what are the things that I'm going to need? If we're going to work and partner with institutions, what are the things they're going to need it to be on their side of things? So REES simply is an online platform for reporting. At its very basic level, REES stands for Respect, Educate, Empower Survivors. And starting in higher ed, we wanted to create a place that predominantly was for students, but at pretty much all of our partner schools, it's used for students, employees, faculty, staff, really everybody within the school community. And the platform, differently than single-use forms, allows I'll call them a user or a student to come to the platform and create a record. So that's their entry point to the platform. The school has the URL sitting probably on a sexual violence page, on their website, on their learning management system. But the student can come, create that record, and then they can save it. So they can hold that record. Maybe they just want to use it as a journal space, and something happened, they write it down, they have it date and time stamped, and they don't know what they want to do. And so they can take that time to, maybe step away from it, maybe not think about it, maybe get triggered and something happen and wanting to come back to it. Um, but they've got that record there. Then they can choose from options of how they want to report. So we have anonymous reporting as a feature where they can share a series of multiple choice questions and answers with their school. They can do what we call a Connect to My Campus, which goes to, in most cases, someone who's going to give them support, like a support. It might be a sexual violence office. It could be a share team, a care team, someone on their school who, is a support place. We can do report to Title IX as a reporting pathway. We can do formal complaint as a reporting pathway. We have schools that have report to athletics. So when we made the platform, again, we thought about how does the platform adapt in the different operational environments that we work. So we started in higher ed, but as I mentioned, we work in other spaces. So when we work in sport, in higher ed, we might say I'm a student, faculty, and staff. In sport, it might be I'm an athlete or I'm a player, I'm a coach, I'm a trainer, I'm a parent. In festivals, it might be I'm an attendee, I'm an artist, I'm a vendor, I'm a volunteer. And so thinking about the way harm occurs across the different places that we exist in our lives. So we use the language of, reporting and supporting people where people live, learn, work, and play. So really all the spaces that we exist in. So as a student, then I can maybe today do an anonymous report. I may be not sure what I want to do with it. And 3 weeks from now, I decide I want support. I need help. I want counseling. I can then use that same record to reach out directly for support. Maybe I have that meeting and I decide a few weeks later, now I want to do a formal complaint or I want to report to Title IX. I can yet again use that same record to send and report directly to my school. And that saves the amount of, or reduces the amount of times that I need to retell that story. It also allows the recipient to have some understanding of the story that I'm coming with. So they can meet me and be prepared to meet me where I'm at differently than me having to show up and sit face to face with someone and tell them what happened. There can be so many barriers to coming forward, and that certainly can be one of them, having to recount an incident of harm. And so that's, that's the essence of the platform. As I say, it works a version of the same in the different spaces that we work in. So in festivals, we know that music festivals, there is, a high drug and alcohol consumption. Typically, people are there to have fun. It's happening on a weekend. There may be camping. That's not the time. Typically, people are going to report an incident of harm. They're going to go home. They're going to think about it. They're going to have their, potentially the fog clear a little bit. And it'll be like, oh, wow, that was my experience. Most festivals have an info at as a, as a contact. Well, it can be really scary to, and we see info ats a lot, to put your information in an email to share that back. Email is not a secure form of transmittal. You don't know who it's going to. You don't know who's on the other end. That in and of itself is a barrier, again, to coming forward. And so when we reached out to festivals, we talked about, they are already doing harm reduction in a lot of cases initiatives. They are thinking about how do they reduce harm, often thinking about it from a drug and alcohol perspective. But we know that harm is happening. And so how do we gather data and information from survivor stories that then can inform how to make the festival safer next year? So adapting what we used for higher ed and making it available to festivals. So we have festival partners across North America. I can share now, because by the time this airs, it will be public, but we're in a partnership with the Canadian Live Music Association to expand our reach related to their members and reporting, and make sure that information is available about reporting, about the opportunity reporting provides, not just at festivals, but at venues, at, for promoters, really across the live music industry. So it's exciting to see, higher ed recognizing that they can do better in addressing sexual violence on campus. And, as we grow our partnerships in higher ed, it's been amazing in live music and events to see, again, this collective will to, we know that this is happening. How do we create safer spaces? Another space we work in is sport. We created something called the Respect Hockey Culture Center, which has been really an incredible project to lead, to be a part of. But it is a North America-wide reporting platform for players, athletes, billet families, parents, volunteers, employees of 8 leagues across North America. So we've got the leagues of the Canadian Hockey League. We've got leagues, the American Hockey League, the USHL, the ECHL, the PWHL. They have all come together to create a space where folks in the leagues can create their record, save that record if harm happens, and then choose from different reporting options. So within that, the 8 leagues have 31 reporting options amongst all of them. And it speaks to the culture shift that is slow, but is coming. The evolution of these spaces and an openness or willingness to recognize that harm is occurring. And so how do we not get in front of it, but see the blind spots, right? How do we encourage that speak up culture so that people can feel okay about coming forward, so that they can feel comfortable sharing their story, documenting firstly their story, then sharing their story, and so that they can then have those stories to inform prevention initiatives, strategy, policy, and how they can make safer spaces.
Okay, that's amazing. So I have a couple questions.
Sure.
You mentioned Title IX. What does that mean?
Title IX. So Title IX is legislation in the U.S., protected statuses. So it relates to I want to say Title IX. Title IX historically has been about protected statuses, things like race, gender, religion, those protected statuses. Title IX legislation continues to evolve under administration. So I would be inclined to say to folks, if you are living in the States and interested in Title IX, kind of look to see how the legislation looks today and how that's relevant for you, especially if someone is, looking at this today versus 6 months out or a year out. If someone comes back to that, it is something that is, it's about the protected statuses, but the reality is those protections have changed, under different leadership and different administrations. So I'd encourage folks to check that for themselves.
Yes. And that was a very diplomatic way to say that.
Well, and I don't want to say the wrong thing, right? Like, I don't want someone to listen to me and go, oh, well, Mary said that's what it is and that's what it is. Because I think we've seen that it's an evolving conversation. It changes with each administration and how they prioritize different things. So I would really just encourage folks to check that out for themselves.
Okay.
And see how it's relevant.
And then my second question is, if this is a platform or technology to report harm. Now, is harm specific to sexual violence or sexual assaults?
Not necessarily. When we partner with organizations. I was going to say we don't throw it out into the world, but I'll actually come back to that because we do as well. But we mostly partner with organizations so that the principles of accountability and transparency can also factor into this. Because if we just create reporting for the sake of reporting, where does that information really go to inform change? So we value our partnerships where we work with schools, we partner with organizations, we're partnered in sport, festivals, where then that host organization, if you will, gets the data that then they can use to make change within their organization. Okay, I totally forgot your question.
That's okay, because actually that triggered another question for me.
Okay, where was I going?
It was harm versus, is it specific sexual assault, sexual violence? Yeah.
Yes. So because we work in so many spaces, they have different needs that get identified, different things they want to prioritize. So some of our partners use us for, and even the language is different. Some use us to address sexual violence on campus. Others want to use us for unwanted sexualized behaviors. Some talk about disclosures and reports. Some talk about reports. So even the language within a sector isn't consistent across. There's nuances. When we work in sport, predominantly we are working or looking at or providing reporting for bullying, abuse, harassment, discrimination. So kind of broader ranges of harm that can occur. Festivals, again, we've got some bullying, abuse, harassment, discrimination as an acronym is bad. So we would say reporting for bad in some cases. Some only do sexual violence, or more specifically sexual violence. So it really depends on how things are prioritized. It's about the way in which reporting occurs. We can use the platform for whistleblowing. We can use the platform for, kind of the typical types of workplace misconduct, theft and, financial malfeasance and those kinds of things. And where we do, it still provides that trauma-informed pathways, regardless of the type of harm that's being reported. And, harm is very subjective. And language is not necessarily commonly understood. So, if I say that if I had an experience, that experience for you might not be traumatic. That might not be something that you would feel the need to share or come forward about. So we really encourage people to think about, what is their experience? Do they feel they were harmed by it? Things like catcalling, things like jokes and comments. One might view them, if we were to look at harm kind of on a spectrum, which we don't. But if one were to, they would see them probably at one side and then much more egregious harm on the opposite side. But really, if there's an environment where, let's say there's jokes or, comments being made that are of sexual nature or inappropriate or discriminatory or racist or whatever in a behavior, or pardon me, in an environment, that behavior is going to impact that culture, right? Like we can talk about physical safety, but we can also talk about psychological safety and the importance of creating safe psychological spaces for people. And so really the ability to come forward and share whatever that experience for an individual is what's important, I think, in
Okay.
regards to that.
Yeah. So, as a victim or a survivor, however they, prefer to refer to themselves as,
Yeah.
if they experienced something that they felt was traumatic to them or harmful to them, and it didn't
Yep.
necessarily meet exactly what the vendor's preference was for reporting, are they still able to go ahead and use the system and
For
report
sure.
and receive assistance if needed?
Yeah. Yeah. I think too in this work, we use the language of intersectionality or an intersectional approach to the work, which recognizes that, you know, not everything fits tidy into a box. And, if I am a racialized person who is also queer, who has a disability, who experiences sexual assault, that may be, a lot of layered experiences in that maybe, maybe they need different supports, specialized supports. Maybe again for the person who is on the receiving, who's going to support them, understanding those layered pieces. Often, you know, a sexual, an incident can be something, but it can also relate to gender. It can relate to these other components or other identity factors, whatever language you want to use. And so I think everybody we work with would say, you know what, come forward, write it down, make report, let us know, and then we can work to support you in the way that you need support. We work in a lot of rural schools. So or rural environments where there may not be a lot of resources. So, you know, when we think about sexual assault centers, for instance, um, there are not typically as many sexual assault centers or rape crisis centers as there are domestic violence shelters or domestic type organizations. And so we can think of dual use kind of services. Um, and so, yeah, supports um, often are made available for really supporting folks when they come forward just where they're at. Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
so is there any expiration date? Say somebody goes
Mm,
to a festival and then realizes that this traumatic event's been sitting with them for a month and then they
mhm.
haven't said anything. Is there any timeline?
No, no. And it can be part of the interesting opportunity with festivals is, often let's say the festival's in the summer, they gear up probably starting in January for the festival, super busy. Festival happens in July, probably have a little bit of downtime. They start kind of getting back into it again. And then it really ramps up. But there may be gaps in when festival employees are working, when they're around. Sometimes they are volunteer board of directors putting on a festival. So in those cases, um, if you were to email them, someone might not even, kind of in the other way, someone might not even get it, or it would just go into you'd get a reply saying we're out of office until X amount, and so we again wanted the space for people to have agency and options. They can really choose to come and report at whatever time frame they want. We didn't create an expiration on it, and in fact, we um, uh, gave users the ability to not only create and edit and all those things a record, but they can also delete their account. They can delete their records. So in many platforms, and when we think about the privacy and the differences on the privacy and data side, in many cases they need to reach out to the vendor, to the platform, to say, can you please um, cancel my account, or remove my account. And we just gave that opportunity to them. I might have come forward with an entry in the platform. I'm graduating, I'm a student, I'm graduating, and I want to put that behind me. We know that there are different policies with respect to how, will a school still support me if I'm no longer a student? Like there's just different policies in the different operational environments that we work with, but we didn't want to really put parameters around how long a system or how long a record can stay in the system. We also know that um, people people who've experienced harm may take a long time before they decide what they want to do with it. And so, um, we can think of, historical examples where, in pop culture and the media that we hear about, that happened a long time ago and they didn't come forward. And maybe something happens more recently that they go, yeah, okay, now I'm ready to come forward. And so we wanted to again honor that, create space for that. We had an individual we launched with a school, and it was in the media, it was public, and they came forward about an incident that had occurred in the 90s, and they had never told their school. And so when they heard about this in the news, they actually went to the platform and created a record and sent it to their school, which for me, that was really meaningful, that we could be the place that person chose to finally come forward. And I think, oh, they've been holding that for all of these years. So that was really meaningful for me. A lot of the work is really meaningful for me, but that was just like, wow, that person finally had the space to be able to come forward for that. Hmm.
Yeah, like there was no expiration date because,
Hmm.
people, like you said, they can
Yeah,
sit with it. Sometimes they repress it and don't even necessarily,
absolutely.
I mean, they know
For
what
sure.
happened, but it's kind of filed away.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really
No.
great.
Yeah. One of the things I'll just mention too, and it's funny because I I talk about it a bit as an afterthought, and it's not an afterthought at all. One of the features of the platform, two of the features that I want to mention just about the platform, because I talked about anonymous reporting, and we often hear, kind of what's the point of anonymous reporting? Why bother doing an anonymous report, or what difference does it make? And when someone does an anonymous report, it can share back to the organization, institution, like details about when and where harm is happening, the kinds of harm that are happening. It can help identify patterns, trends, hotspots, time of year. Like we have seen in higher ed, February, there's often harm happening. And it's like, kind of what's going on in February. Well, it's Valentine's Day, it's reading week, like there's stuff going on, or spring breaks start in February. The red zone is the first kind of 6 to 8 weeks of school starting back in the fall, where we know that there's much higher rates. And so it can help, anonymous reporting can really help inform those things. We also had heard from folks who support, or who provide supports, that, what, anonymous reporting really is a challenge for us because we can't go back to those individuals. So we created a what we call a bidirectional communication chat feature within the platform, so that if, let's say, you're a workplace, or you're a festival or whatever, and I'm a user, I can send an anonymous report. You're going to get it, and you can follow up with me. So you can say, "Hey, I got your anonymous report. How can I help? What do you need? How can I still support you?" And we really wanted to bridge the gap for folks who aren't ready to come forward, but still may need supports and resources. That was really important, and that goes back to collaboration. That goes back to hearing from, we call it the REES community, but hearing from the folks that we work with, that that this would be, that having this feature would both enable ongoing support for survivors not ready to come forward, or people who've been harmed, and then also enable organizations to be able to continue to support them. So that's been an important collaboration. Another thing that the feature, or pardon me, that the platform provides, is a feature that we call repeat perpetrator identification. And this is I'll call it a matching feature, but it allows, within an operational environment, so within a school, or within a workplace, or within potentially a festival. Festivals don't use it so much just because they're broader kind of spaces. But often we know, like on campuses, the statistics are very high that someone is going to know the person that harmed them. Same with sports. So there's definitely places where we work where the likelihood, if you're in a school, you're going to know who that person is, or somehow be connected to them. And so the repeat perpetrator feature allows me to put in some identifiers for the person that harmed me. Let's say you and I go to the same school, or in the same sport. You go in and put in those same identifiers. It's going to trigger a match, and the organization is going to be notified. And so that can really help identify early on when someone is, causing harm, potentially causing harm in the community. And it can help with early identification of risk. And I think, again, we can look to examples. Certainly in higher ed, there are. Certainly in sport, there are. Those things often overlapping, but where there are, hundreds of victims, and it is tough to come forward. It is tough to come forward. It is tough to tell anybody, but there's the ability to create that entry, and potentially contribute to that, to identifying that match. And when we built hockey, and again, hockey is really unparalleled, the Respect Hockey Culture Center in terms of its scope. But if you are a player who experiences, you're on a team in Canada, and you have an incident of harm, let's say it's a coach, and that coach now goes to coach in a different league in the United States, we have the ability to match across jurisdictions, across organizations, and that is huge. It is, it's really exciting to be able to help make the connection and connect the dots in those spaces.
Well, and I know you mentioned that people question why anonymous, but I think the anonymous portion is so key because sometimes just telling your story, you just need that like narrative therapy
Yeah.
of just putting it out there.
I just want to put it out.
Exactly.
Yeah, I want someone else to know.
Yeah. And then the fact
Yeah.
that they can receive support in doing so on top of that is really cool. I think it also helps with that obligation that there's not a true obligation, but like the societal obligation that they put on victims and survivors of like, well, you've been traumatized by this individual. It's your not not the duty of the perpetrator to stop causing harm,
Yeah.
but it's the obligation of the victim or the survivor it's their responsibility to stop that from happening again, which it's not. But people may feel that obligation and that ability to report anonymously and still put that out there to have somebody else take care of is huge.
Yeah.
So when you enter in the information, do you have the option to actually identify the perpetrator? Like, I know it's Jim Smith. Sorry if there's a real Jim Smith out there, but
sorry, Jim. Which there
sorry,
probably
Jim.
is a Jim
I'm sure
out there.
there's a lot.
That's
actually why I came up with the name.
Yeah,
it's a very popular name.
Yeah. So, that's an excellent point. We actually are not going to, we're not going to match on Jim Smith exactly for that reason. There could be a whole pile of Jim Smiths that exist that would be, wrongfully identified as a person causing harm. So what we look at are what we call unique identifiers. So there are things that only one person can hold. So things like social media handles, phone number, email address, the repeat perpetrator, or we call it RPI feature, isn't going to work really in public spaces. It's not like, oh, the guy in the red hoodie with the brown hair did it. Like, it's not about that. It's about more typically identifying, someone that is known or known within the community. And it also, I want to mention, if we don't have it used anonymously in our platform, and again, we are mindful of the sensitivity in this space. We are aware that allegations related to a perpetrator are just that, and creating a space where someone can just anonymously throw out people's identifiers, create some other challenges with it. So again, it's a space where if you and I put in identifiers, we've also put in our name. If that goes to the school or the league or whatever organization we're reporting back to, they're going to get that information, and then they're going to decide, okay, what are we going to do with it? They may follow up with us. They may say, oh, you know what, we've heard this name brought to us in other different ways, or, we've had in-person reports about this. So they're going to assess that from a risk management perspective. But it was important that from just again, from thinking about the platform, wanting to not kind of compromise that by have it just being an anonymous place to just throw somebody's name in.
Okay. And I just realized I actually am friends with a Jim Smith. So I'm so sorry, Jimmy. I'm so sorry. I think I threw your name out there. But we're going to stick with Jim. So let's say I create a profile and I throw in Jim's social media, all of that. And I'm okay with not being anonymous, and it's me, but I don't necessarily want to take any kind of legal action toward Jim. And we're at the school. So say, is the school able to approach Jim and, without saying Ingrid's made these allegations?
Well, in order for there to be a match, you, Ingrid, and someone, so let's say it's me, would have to do that, and they would get the match. The school's really going to, or whatever the organization is, they're really going to weigh how they want to proceed, depending, are we minors? That might be a different scenario than whether we're adults. Is this person already known to them? Is this person already has a history? Has this person already been warned or been, talk to or something. So it's really going to depend case by case. I don't think there's necessarily if this happens, then this is going to happen. It would be very much a case by case scenario and kind of weighing out what occurred. I think trauma informed thinking about what their response would be might hopefully lend them to thinking, well, if I just go now to Jim and talk to him, and if he's only harmed you and I, he's probably going to know it was you and I that came forward and created the match, right? So I think there's a level of consideration and caution, and again, hopefully trauma-informed response on the side of the organization who is receiving RPI matches. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then I want to emphasize again, you said all of this information is encrypted. So if the organizations, schools, or festivals, if they want to collect the data and use it to make changes, they're not collecting Ingrid's information and
they're good question. They are collecting what you give them. So if you do anonymous report, then you're not providing your name. We call them anonymous reports and named reports. So there are various reporting pathways that you can put your name on them. So RPI being one of them. If you report to Title IX, that's got your name typically. And because the intention is then that they will follow up with you. So there's there's the anonymous option, and then there's the other options where, you are doing a formal complaint. Most environments don't allow for an anonymous formal complaint process. And so then you would provide your information. So it's your choice about how much information you want to share, and that will help guide kind of the different paths that you use. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes sense. And then also, I think it's important to understand that while you guys may not have an expiration date, if someone did want to pursue legal recourse, there could be a statute of limitations. And that would vary depending on where they are and what the allegations are.
Yeah, definitely. That's for sure a true statement. And again, would encourage folks to, look within, kind of think of the context that it's occurring. If it's within an organization, are there timeframes there? Because certainly there can be, especially in schools, there can be. And then within your state, your province, wherever you're living, what other legal considerations there are. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you mentioned your reach is your Canada. You said Buffalo. I feel like Buffalo is kind of part of Canada. It's so far up there. And the various hockey leagues, but where exactly in the United States, part of North America?
So we work in California. We have festival in California. We have school in California. We have a festival in Iowa. And then mostly in sport. Mm-hmm. We work with we work in the hospitality sector, supporting conferences that support the sector. And so those conferences are occurring within the US, in hospitality and in restaurant and hospitality sector. So we kind of work in different ways with different organizations. I can't really talk about it right now. We have a pretty significant launch coming in the new year that will have us really permeating throughout the United States, in a particular area, but really permeating the entire US. So yeah, we're kind of in different spaces in different ways. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it's continuing to evolve. Like it's continuing to grow and expand and evolve. And then in Canada, we are like lots of schools across the country. We're coast to coast in festivals. In Alberta, we are working, and Manitoba, working in the technology sectors. So we actually have reporting for harm that's occurring across the entire tech sector, because we know that female founders of like LGBTQ, BIPOC, they experience higher rates of harassment, misconduct, and so created these spaces at the provincial level, Yeah, so we're doing some really kind of interesting and innovative work in Alberta as well. We're launching across the province with a safe space for folks to be able to document their stories of sexual violence. So there's lots of important work happening.
There is, and I'm so excited to hear this because it's so easy for a lot of us to sit and say so many things need to be done and nobody's doing anything, but this is a
Yeah.
prime example of doing. So, how do people get in touch with you? Do they get like do if I were wanting to personally report something, and I attended this festival, is there a separate
Yeah.
way to get in touch with Reese versus I'm a vendor and I want to
Mm,
collaborate with you?
sure. So yeah, great question. So if you're wanting to reach out and say hi, or connect as a vendor, reach out to us at hello@reesecommunity.com. If you are someone who is wanting to report, it would be check with that organization, check the website, or reach out to them to say, are you a partner with REES? And do you have reporting platform? And then they would report directly into the platform that way. We did a partnership. We created a partnership almost a year ago with Take Back the Night, which is the sexual assault. They host the sexual assault legal helpline, or pardon me, yeah, the sexual assault legal helpline. And we actually created a space that allows, it's really just open space in the US. We don't have it in Canada, for someone to go there, create their record, and save that. So they can use it as a safe journal space. And if they want, they can send that directly to the sexual assault legal helpline and be connected with legal counsel to decide or explore kind of next steps for them. Yeah, so it kind of depends. Reaching out to us as a vendor is one thing, but then really looking in the different spaces. Certainly, if you're an athlete, in Canada, we work with a group called Athletes Empowered, and so we've opened up. I keep calling it reporting. It's not necessarily reporting in those spaces, but that safe journal space for folks to be able to document their story and keep that till they decide what to do with that. That's available across Canada for athletes at all levels of play. So it kind of depends where you are in terms of how you would access the platform. Mm-hmm.
Do you have any social media at all?
Oh yeah, we're
Okay.
at Reese Community. So at Reese Community, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. We're on LinkedIn. Not so much on X. Not so much on X. Might find some old stuff or like intermittent stuff there, but not so much there. But certainly Instagram would probably be the place that we are often found. Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And is there any words of encouragement or wisdom you would like to leave with listeners?
So I want to acknowledge that we are recording right now in Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we've had this has been a great conversation. I appreciate the conversation, but I want to honor that we're here in October and that that this is going to air in November, which in Canada it's so in the US it's October, in Canada it's typically November. If you're in Australia, it's in May. But I want to honor that for people who experience harm, there is hope. There are supports available and people at the end of a phone, an anonymous chat, or, whatever it might be, who want to help you. And that yeah, I think that, there's the "we believe you" and those sentiments. And those are absolutely important. But I think, just that there's hope and there's help out there. There are lots of amazing organizations, and it can be tough to get help sometimes or feel like you can reach out for help sometimes. Um, can be scary to do that. There can be lots of barriers to do that. Um, but just know that you're not alone, that there are people who have walked in your shoes and come out the other side, And it's okay not to be okay. Healing's not linear. Kind of the phrases that we use, and we use the phrases because they're just true. So those would be just some kind of parting words that I would have. Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. I think that's lovely. And I think those are all great reminders to everyone. So I
Thank
appreciate
you.
your time. I appreciate your lifelong work that you've dedicated
Thank
to.
you, Ingrid, and yours, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
we're all rowing in the same direction,
We
right?
are.
It's
We
yeah,
are.
we are supporting one another and helping to raise profiles. So I appreciate you, inviting me on and including me in your conversation, because it's an important one. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Mary, for joining me today, and thank you, Warriors, for listening. I have included all of Mary's links, including her 1 in 3 profile, in the show notes. I will be back next week with another episode for you. Until then, stay strong, and always remember, wherever you are in your journey, you are not alone. Find more information, register as a guest, or leave a review by going to the website 1in3podcast.com. That's the number 1, IN, the number 3, podcast.com. Follow 1 in 3 on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1 in 3 podcast. To help me out, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 1 in 3 is a .5 Pinoy production. Music written and performed by Tim Crow.